You know, I used to be the kind of person who went through life with a bit of naivety, thinking that most people were honest and nice by default. I guess I always tried to be that way myself. But these days, I've become a bit more cynical and not as easily fooled. Still, sometimes I have my moments of being too generous and getting taken advantage of. It's like my faith in humanity gets shattered, but every now and then, something or someone comes along and helps rebuild it, even if just a little. Back when I was younger, I was a total pushover. Now that I'm 31, I've learned a bit from my mistakes, but at 22, fresh out of college with my computer science degree, I fell head over heels for Natalie. Natalie was 4 years older than me and was also studying at the same college, working towards her English degree with dreams of becoming a writing teacher and getting an MFA. We had different backgrounds and interests, but surprisingly, we hit it off really well. Natalie originally came from Greece and lived there until she was 10, and I had moved to the USA from Japan specifically for college. All credit to Natalie for that. Oh man, thanks to her, my English got way better. It's kind of funny though, 'cause I also picked up a bunch of Greek from her, but she never bothered learning any Japanese. Anyway, we got super serious and dated exclusively after just 2 months of being together for a whole year. Looking back, I've realized that I've always let myself get pushed into relationships, even back in my teenage days. If a girl showed interest, I'd just go along with it, thinking it was the nice thing to do. Don't get me wrong, I really liked Natalie, but now, years later, I see that she pretty much pressured me into the relationship too. After finishing my degree, I scored a sweet job as a software developer with a handsome salary. Natalie was still wrapping up her BA in English and worked at a clothing store in the mall. Guess you could say I was a bit of a sucker, always trying to be nice. I even let her move into my place without paying rent. She said she'd cover groceries, but we ended up eating out most of the time, so she didn't contribute financially at all. She claimed she paid for school through scholarships, and I had no reason to doubt her. Then, after she graduated, she popped the question and proposed to me. It was a bit weird, 'cause I grew up thinking guys were supposed to do the proposing. But hey, this is the USA, and things can be different here. So, my parents live in Japan, but they came to America for the wedding. At first they weren't too thrilled about me marrying someone from a different race, but Natalie won them over with her charm. I always spoke highly of her, and since my parents don't know any English, I had to do a lot of translating. Props to Natalie for being patient with that. Her parents, who are Greek Americans, were totally cool with us being together. They didn't see any issue with their daughter marrying a younger Japanese guy. Speaking of parents, early on in our relationship, I told Natalie that some of my distant relatives were part of the Imperial Japanese during WW2, and some even died in kamikaze missions. I also mentioned that I've been practicing judo my whole life. I wasn't bragging or trying to sound edgy, it was just her asking about my past and interests. In return, Natalie shared a pretty intense story. She told me about how her father used to be involved with the mafia in Greece and had to flee to the USA with a new identity to avoid getting caught for a crime he committed. This was back when we were just getting to know each other and not super serious yet. I think she wanted to impress me with her background and show that she had some serious street cred. Personally, she's about as gangster as a wardrobe from Abercrombie and Fitch. But once we got serious as a couple, Natalie came clean about her dad's mafia hitman story, admitting she was just trying to impress me and score cool points. I guess she didn't think we'd last long, so she spilled it in a cute way, hoping I'd like her more. Weird flex, right? Anyway, I accepted it and moved on, thinking her dad was actually a retired auto mechanic. I didn't dwell on it too much. Fast forward a couple of years and I think our marriage is going well. We even have a daughter named Katie, and I managed to buy us a house with a down payment and a monthly mortgage. I also took care of Natalie's school loans. Turns out, her scholarship claims were all made up, which looking back, should have been a big red flag about her honesty. After being a homemaker for a while, Natalie told me she wanted to pursue her MFA, but none of the nearby universities accepted her due to her low undergraduate GPA. However, she got into a private for-profit university that overlooked her GPA for the bargain price of $20,000 per semester. Quite a steep cost. Now my daughter Katie is 7 years old, and let me tell you, people are absolutely amazed when they see her. Having a mixed Japanese and Greek child is something truly beautiful, and I'm incredibly proud to be her dad. I mean, I know all parents feel that way about their kids, but I'm not kidding when I say it. These days, though, I've become more clear-headed and realized that Natalie wasn't exactly the best partner. At best, she was a lazy opportunist, and at worst, a shameless gold digger. Back then, I wasn't as clear-headed, and it didn't occur to me that she might have just been using me to pay for her education and have a child, so she could secure a free house and child support before divorcing me and taking everything. Sometimes, I get a bit weak and imagine that maybe Natalie didn't plan it all like that and actually loved me at some point. But honestly, I worked full-time while she dropped off our child at her parents' place to attend classes most days. A couple more years went by, and Natalie finished her MFA. I still thought our marriage was going great. I had a sensible work schedule, spending time with my wife and daughter, doing all the regular family stuff. We'd go out to dinner, take trips, and celebrate anniversaries like any normal married couple. So, up until now, Natalie has always been telling me how much she loves me, love of her life and all that stuff. But then, out of the blue, she hits me with the cliché, "I need space," which I now realize is Greek for "I've been cheating on you for a while now, and I don't care if you know." Can you believe it? Of course, I ask her if there's someone else, and she's all like, "No, I just need to find myself." I'm like, "Okay, what does that even mean? Are you moving out or what?" I swear I was such a big sucker. I ended up staying in some crummy motel room paying a fortune weekly, all while still covering the expenses for my 3-bedroom house just to give her space. Natalie, being all noble and generous, would let me come to my own house on Sundays to see my daughter and pretend to be a happy family for a little while. But guess what? After just a month of me being in this Motel 6, she drops the bombshell that she wants a divorce. I was devastated. And here comes the classic line. I need to find myself. Yeah, right. Total bullsh*T. The divorce news wasn't even a bombshell. It was more like the last nudge that broke the camel's back. I had to ask her again if there was someone else, and she sticks to her no. So, she straight up told me she didn't love me anymore. I had kind of accepted it, so I wasn't completely devastated when Natalie said she was leaving. But the real gut punch was knowing I'd have to share custody of our kid instead of being a full, happy family all the time. And let me tell you, I was a real sucker. Natalie didn't want to share custody. She wanted full custody. To make matters worse, she started making up claims about me being offensive. While I was at that Motel 6, she went to her parents and spun a tale about how I had been offensive for years. She even used my judo practice as proof that I had a lot of aggression. During the court proceedings, she accused me of being offensive to our 3-year-old daughter. I tried to defend myself, saying she was making it all up. But she went on to claim that I was emotionally and verbally cruel to her as well. It was ridiculous, because she was the one who said she needed space and kicked me out of the house. But she just called me a liar. Let me tell you, the whole process was ugly and messy, and the judge, who was relatively young but seemed jaded beyond her years, sided with Natalie. She denied me custody and only gave me supervised visitation rights. As Katie grew older and started understanding words, Natalie poisoned her mind against me to the point where Katie refused to see me, even for supervised visits. I don't know if Katie herself said, "I don't want to see my dad," but she always relayed that our daughter didn't want to see me. She communicated this through text messages. Sometimes, I hoped I could catch her admitting on audio recording that I was never offensive and that she was a big liar. But I think she was worried about that too. So she stuck to texts where she could be more careful with her words. A whole year went by. I'm still paying the mortgage on a house I can't live in, and I can't see my daughter without any warning. Then one day, my boss calls me into his office and fires me. Since it's a regular job, they can fire me for any reason without having to explain. It was a shock for my team to see me carrying a box of my things out to my car as the days and weeks passed. My former colleagues informed me that there were rumors around the office that my ex-wife had called our HR department and made false claims about me, saying I wasn't paying child support, that I was obsessed, and an offensive husband. Now that I know what I know, I realize I should have immediately told my boss about my divorce and warned them that my ex could be a bit crazy. I texted Natalie to ask her about it, but she acted clueless and had mutual friends swear me to secrecy. They told me that Natalie had become a composition teacher at a community college after getting her MFA. It seems She waited until the child and spousal support I paid became a standard, regardless of my income. And then, for her own reasons, she decided to sabotage my career. Luckily, I had plenty of references from my old job and a sought-after skill set, so I knew I wouldn't stay unemployed for long. But to keep up with the child support, spousal support, and mortgage payments for Natalie without draining my savings, I needed something to hold me over. So I started driving for Uber. I did it for a few weeks, while also interviewing with different companies. I had saved enough money so I wasn't desperate enough to accept just any job while doing my rideshare gig. One day, I picked up a passenger named Victoria. She was around my age, just 4 months older, and worked in graphic design. She had Italian heritage but had lived in the USA her whole life and didn't speak the language, so we start chatting and before I know it, we're officially dating. She's fully aware of my situation, and the best part is that this is the first relationship where I didn't feel pressured into calling someone my girlfriend. During this time, my lawyer tried to negotiate with Natalie's side to reduce my monthly obligations or change visitation rights, but it didn't work out. Natalie's lawyer presented some paperwork claiming her job was only part-time and couldn't meet her lifestyle needs. Weirdly enough, Natalie herself never showed up to these meetings. Her lawyer represented her instead. Oh, and get this. She even went ahead and filed a restraining order against me from entering my own house just to back up her false narrative about me being offensive. It's almost laughable. Now, I do have some judo training, but I never really use it to hurt anyone, even in self-defense. My training partners say I hold back too much, always worried about making others uncomfortable. So Victoria and I date for a few months. Meanwhile, I score a new job in the tech industry with a higher salary than before. Unlike Natalie, Victoria has her own place and doesn't rush into moving in with me. Actually, she asked if I wanted to move in with her. I enjoy my one-bedroom place and prefer taking things slow with her. Over time, Victoria was totally fine with the whole situation. She shared with me how she's going to community college to get her AA in graphic design. It turns out she's naturally talented and already excels at her job without any formal education. But of course, her employer needs her to have some college degree for an official promotion. What a coincidence, right? Here's the interesting part. Victoria's English teacher, a core requirement for her degree, is none other than my ex-wife. Crazy, huh? But Victoria never spills the beans about our relationship to her teacher. I asked her to keep it hush-hush, and she's totally on board with my plan. Victoria goes above and beyond, and she becomes friends with the teacher, getting all chummy by suggesting they grab drinks after class over the next few weeks. She's a real master at winning trust and working her way into a position of confidence. So, she finishes the course with a good grade and still maintains her friendship with the teacher. And here's where it gets even better. Victoria manages to record a conversation where Natalie admits she works at the college full-time. All it took was a couple of drinks and some friendly chit-chat to get Natalie talking. Little did the teacher know she was chatting with her ex-husband's girlfriend. It's pretty funny how these things unfold, especially when someone thinks they can trust you as a friend. Cheers to Victoria for handling this with style and getting Natalie on tape making fun of me for driving for Uber. Priceless. Get this. The guy's got a master's in computer science, but he's driving a taxi. Victoria did her thing slowly but surely, recording Natalie admitting she's a liar and making fun of her exes like they're losers. She really got one over on them. Victoria actually got Natalie on tape confessing that her ex was a total harmless dweeb, a real scaredy cat. So was he a nice guy? Oh yeah, he was like sweet maple syrup Ned Flanders from The Simpsons. But then, Natalie had the nerve to mock his Japanese accent with those ignorant ching-chong sounds. It's just messed up. And she goes on about how this weakling never even touched her or their daughter. Oh man, Natalie, if you mess with me, you'll be in big trouble. And if he ever tries to harm our daughter, I'd do something drastic like poison him or whatever. So, about a week later, I put on some fake tears in front of the judge and convinced her to order him to pay a hefty amount. I even managed to get him fired from his job with an asterisk next to it. Why would I do that if he's supposedly a nice guy? It's just for fun and games, you know, messing with him a bit. Every time Victoria and Natalie went out, Victoria would show me her phone all excited and play the recordings of what went down. I already had some good evidence. But then Victoria told me about this piece de la résistance. A moment when Natalie talked about cute guys in the English class she was teaching, and she's 28, while most of the guys are like 19 to 21. Natalie is quite the character. At 33, she proudly boasts about hooking up with students all the time like it's no big deal. She was even having close relations with her classmates while she was still married. She talks about having closeness with them like it's some kind of sport. In her shared office, she laughs about doing it on another professor's desk and not even bothering to clean it up or tell them afterward. And she jokes, "Of course they hooked up with me. How else do you think some of those clueless students managed to pass their courses?" Victoria actually got specific students' names. All this is pretty nasty, but so far it's technically hearsay, and she might deny it when questioned. Seems more like a matter for the school itself to mull over and decide. Victoria has already finished her associate's degree and got promoted at work. She manages to arrange a meeting with one of the top administrators at the school to discuss something urgent, and she shows him the recording she has. The administrator thanks her and assures her that they'll take care of the situation. The part of the recordings that caught my attention the most was when Natalie was bragging about bringing students to her house, getting close with them, and even doing pills with them while her roommate Katie was also at home. I didn't waste any time trying to be fancy with lawyers. Yep, I sent my lawyer the recordings too, but before that, I called the police. And here's what went down. Natalie got fired from her job, lost all her college degrees due to academic dishonesty, and got banned from teaching. The students who were subpoenaed for questioning didn't get kicked out of school, but they got a serious warning to keep any romantic stuff away from campus and not involve school employees. The cops found pills at Natalie's place, and now she's paying the price. She lost custody, alimony, and her home because she got an 8-year prison sentence for pills possession, child endangerment, lying under oath, and making false reports to the police. If she behaves well, she might be out in 5 years, but she'll never get custody of Katie again. On the bright side, Katie is doing great. She loves Victoria, loves her dad, and is back home as a happy and lovely little girl. Oh, and I discovered that Natalie's parents lied in court to make me lose custody of Victoria, so I tipped off the police, and now they're looking into a murder case from 25 years ago involving Natalie. Anyway, things have turned around for Victoria and me. We're married, living together with our daughter Victoria, and we're expecting a son in the fall. Life's getting better. My parents still don't know English. However, Victoria is learning a lot of Japanese as well as Victoria. When it comes to marriage and being a father, my brain says to be cautious, but my heart says to have faith that not everyone is terrible. So yeah, screw you, Natalie. Thanks for reading. You know, since I was a kid, I always dreamed of becoming a doctor. But senior year in college, I had to shift gears and aim for becoming a physician assistant, mainly 'cause of money troubles. My dad got hurt at work, and I had to step up to help support the fam. So, I got to know more about PAs, the shorter study period, and the chance to help people really drew me in. That's also where I met my future wife. Life's been pretty sweet ever since. As the years went by, we got on top of our money problems, so I started thinking about medical school again. My wife was totally on board. Soon after we had that talk, she got pregnant. What a surprise. Turns out I did really well in my applications and got to pick from a bunch of schools. My wife was thrilled for us, but after our baby was born, she got hit with postpartum depression and times got tough, but we pulled through. I had to travel all over the country for interviews, so I was gone a lot when our kid was between 4 and 6 months old. My folks really came through for us during this time, supporting my wife a lot. I gotta admit, our romantic life took a bit of a hit for a year after our kid was born, mostly 'cause of all this. So, we made the call to choose a school in a different state, even though I had a free ride at a local one. My wife was totally pumped to take off with me, and the other school had a better reputation, was in an awesome spot, and they threw in a pretty solid scholarship too. Then, wham! COVID hit. With a kiddo to think about, we weren't cool with the idea of daycare, and she was nearly done with her student loans. She had them refinanced, so no break there. We decided it was best for her to stay close to my folks and keep her job. They're amazing and look after our little one weekdays, and they give her a breather when she needs it. The plan was to bring them up in the spring if COVID would let up. With our savings, she could even take a couple of years off work, no problem. Everything seemed just fine between us until late October when she drops this bombshell that she wants to split up. I was totally floored. All I could muster was telling her to do whatever makes her happy. I know, lame response, but I was thrown for a loop. I mean, I just called to check in on her and she hits me with that out of nowhere. So, we didn't chat for about 3 weeks after that bombshell. I rolled back into town for Thanksgiving, and suddenly she's acting like she never said anything about splitting up. She says she's just been feeling down, 'cause we haven't been close, what with the distance and all. We had a real heart-to-heart and decided we'd try to work things out. Then I was back to med school for a week before they called off the in-person classes for the term 'cause of COVID. As I'm sitting at the airport waiting for her, she sends me a text saying she needs some alone time. So, I ended up crashing with my folks for a few days. When we finally got together to talk, she admits she's not happy with my decision to go after the doctor dream. Turns out, she's been scared to tell me this whole time. I asked if there was anything I could do to change how she felt, and she dropped the big one. It's either her or med school. I picked medicine. Man, that was the hardest call I've ever had to make. Now my kid's gonna grow up in a broken home. I suggested couples counseling, but she wasn't having any of it. When I asked if there was anything I could do to change her mind, she was a firm no. She was done playing second fiddle. I'm still reeling, you know? And the worst part is, I won't get to see my kiddo as much as I want to, 'cause I'm usually halfway across the country. Right now, I'm looking into some stuff, thinking maybe mediation might be the way to go, but everything's kind of blurry. She's saying we can split everything down the middle. Our bank account, stuff we own, even custody of our kid. She's even offering to buy me out of the stuff we bought together. I'm at a loss about how child support is gonna play out, since I won't have a job for the next 3.5 years and she's raking in decent dough. Honestly, I don't know why I'm even sharing all this. Maybe because some folks here might have been through something similar. Who knows? The world's gone mad. Update. I posted all the stuff above when my wife, out of nowhere, said she wanted a divorce. We've been together for 6 years, hitched for 2, and we've got a little guy who's 1.5 years old. We set up mediation, which we both agreed on, but then she up and canceled it a couple of weeks back. She said she wanted us to work through stuff ourselves. So I went home after Christmas. We even planned a road trip to New Orleans, just to chill, eat some good food and spend time together. Then, last night, I made up my mind to snoop through her phone while she was out cold. The thing that jumped out at me was her chats with her sister and best friend were wiped clean. My spidey senses started tingling right away. So, I come across this group chat she missed deleting, where there's some guy being talked about. I do a deep dive into her social media and land on WhatsApp. She'd cleared out her chats with this dude and her sister and best friend, but she missed deleting a group chat that included all three. They call themselves Lost MILFs. One divorcee, one who's never been married, and my soon-to-be ex-wife. Then, bam, I find it all. She'd been seeing another guy hooking up with him, even saying, "I love you" to him. She shared with her friends how freaked out she was that her period was late, and was bad-mouthing me, telling her friends complete lies about stuff I never did. Her sister, who I thought of as my own, straight up lied to my face, acting surprised when I told her about the divorce. They even went through my phone records, looking for any dirt on me. Came up empty. Wow, he really is perfect. I think the reality of the divorce made her snap back to her senses. She told this guy it was over. She confessed her love to him, said she had no feelings for me, but still wanted to work on our marriage. This dude I've never even met had the nerve to say I don't care about my son, that he could be a better dad to him than me, that he loved her more than I ever could. She asked me to look after our kiddo while she went to therapy. But nope, turns out she handed off our kid to me so she could go mess around with this other guy. She's just awful. I can't wrap my head around how she turned from the woman I married into this. She tried to hide it all. If I hadn't snooped on her phone, I'd still be blissfully clueless, thinking everything's good. Just yesterday, she was boasting about how her patients always want to see pictures of me and our son, saying we're both good-looking and look like twins. It's like she's living in some twisted fantasy. Guys, I can't put into words how blindsided I am. It's always about someone else. Always. She rewrote history, remembered things wrong, and flat out made stuff up. It's like that whole affair fog people talk about. Anything to make sure she's not the bad guy in her own story. I'm about to pick her up from work. I'm actually waiting in the parking lot right now. I plan to confront her at the same park where I proposed. After that, I'm handing her the divorce papers and heading back to San Francisco this weekend. Oh, And I forgot to mention, there were a bunch of people creeping on my social media and sending her any posts I made. Super weird stuff. Update. The moment I rolled up to our spot, she knew something was up. Started crying right off the bat. I dropped the bombshell. She apologized, admitted she was garbage, a terrible person, said she didn't even recognize herself anymore, and that she hated who she'd become. She wanted to know how I found out, asking, "Who do I need to cut out of my life who can't keep a secret?" She thought it was either her sister or her best friend who ratted her out. I just stared at her and said it didn't matter who spilled the beans. If someone did, they did me a solid. That's what I would have done. The issue isn't how I found out, it's that she tried to hide it, that she did it at all. She agreed and apologized again, but it felt phony as hell. Her first reaction was probably how she really felt. She admitted there's no excuse for what she did, and she knew it was wrong, but she tried to explain her side of things. Said she was going to be totally upfront. Turns out it started with a different guy, not the one I was aware of. She claimed it all started last October with a different guy. Get this, I brought in a pest control dude to deal with some critters at our place. This guy was a married dude in his early 40s with 2 kids. She told me she was feeling pretty down and alone after having our baby. She had postpartum depression. So she started sexting this pest guy from her work. She swore it never got physical. Said she'd feel gross after sexting him, block him for a couple of weeks, and then go back for more. This went on from then until this March. I had no clue. She told me the guy still tries to call her from different numbers, and she just blocks them. His wife is still in the dark. Yeah, seriously. When I headed off to med school, she told me she started feeling lonely again. That's when she met a 26-year-old undocumented tile worker in September. Dude didn't speak a lick of English. That's the affair I found out about. She claimed she wasn't thinking straight at the time. Whenever I'd come home for breaks, she'd act like everything was normal. We'd have sex, I'd go back to school, and she'd text me all lovey-dovey, call me every night, then she'd fool around with this guy during the day. I remember her going into quarantine for 10 days because of COVID. She works in healthcare. She shacked up with him for those 10 days straight while my parents looked after our kid. And she kept up her daily chats with me the whole time. Man, it's messed up. I felt like I was gonna hurl. She confessed she knew she'd taken things too far after that. Said she understood I was too good for all this. That's when she dropped the divorce bomb on me out of nowhere. She figured if I ever found out, I'd leave her for sure. Anyways, she promised these were the only 2 affairs she had while we were together. Not that it changes anything. Oh, and get this. She spent $4 grand of our money to help this guy she barely knew get a work truck. The guy was broke, and she wanted to give him a leg up. She admitted she knew nothing serious could come out of her thing with this guy. He made her feel less alone. But that's about it. Not like you, she said. And while she claimed she wasn't blaming me or trying to make excuses, she couldn't help but remind me that I was the one who chose to go off to med school instead of staying local. And all I'm thinking is, what I do for you, what do you do for me? But I kept that to myself and just kept listening. She claimed she never told the other guy she loved him, but I don't speak Spanish well enough to confirm. She's Latina, I'm black. She said Google Translate got it all wrong. When this dude said I didn't care about our son, even though he'd never met me, she didn't contradict him because she didn't want to add to his hurt when she broke up with him. She let him vent, she said. She claimed she never badmouthed me to him, saying that I'm an awesome dad. But I called BS on that. I mean, why would this guy talk smack about me without knowing me? He had to base his opinions on what she told him about me, but honestly, it doesn't matter. Then she asked me why I wasn't yelling at her, hitting her, treating her like the trash she felt she was. She repeated that she despised herself, regretted her actions, and didn't even recognize herself anymore. She wished she had talked about her feelings instead of resorting to cheating. She admitted that the cheating only pushed her further away from me and made things worse. She realized she wasn't happy with what she was doing, and the problem was within herself. She blamed it on postpartum depression, vowing to never have another child. She promised she would never marry or be in a relationship again, and that she would focus on herself and our son. She was deeply ashamed, she confessed, and would never be able to tell her very Christian parents about what she'd done. I replied that I didn't react harshly because it wouldn't help anything. I don't do things just for a fleeting feel-good moment. I do what I believe is right. She claimed she got why I wanted a divorce, but said she believed she could turn things around, better herself, become the woman she was when we first met, and basically mend our relationship. She proposed a separation and promised she'd wait for me, as long as it takes. She said she'd remain single while I'm free to do as I please during that time. She wondered if maybe with time, I could forgive her. She knew I didn't trust her anymore, but she was willing to work hard to rebuild that trust. She even offered me to come back to our place for the night, saying she'd sleep on the sofa bed and I could have the main bed if that would make me more comfortable. Of course, I said no. Here's my problem. If we didn't have a son, I'd be out of here. This whole thing is totally messed up. I could find someone else who would treat me right, someone I could fully trust. I brought her into my life, my family, we had a son, and I was good to her. And what did she do? She screwed me over. But we do have a son. I chatted with my cousin, whose wife cheated on him with his best buddy when their kid was about the same age as my son. He said he cut ties with her, and it felt good at the moment. But when his son grew up, he's 9 now, it had an impact on him. The kid started acting out. He would ask his dad why he and his mom couldn't be together anymore. He was upset about the situation. My cousin said the pain of seeing his son suffer like that was even worse than the pain of the divorce. He advised me to consider giving it some time and see how I feel. He pointed out that cheating is pretty common these days, even among celebrities or folks you'd least expect. He said he'd get it if I chose to divorce her, but based on his own experience, that might not be the best move. What he went through pretty much aligns with all the research I've seen. Studies have clearly demonstrated that growing up in a single-parent home can lead to significant negative impacts on the kid. My son is my everything. For his sake, I've decided to give it a shot. I'm planning to cut off contact for at least 6 months to a year. Then, I'll reassess how I feel. Regardless of what I achieve, if I become a doctor, live out my dreams, and my child doesn't reach his potential, then what's it all for? Anyway, by then it was really late. I headed over to my parents' place and hit the sack. I don't know, it seemed like she was being honest. She opened up about something that happened which I had no clue about. She seemed to feel regret. But that doesn't undo what she did. Having a kid definitely makes things more complicated. Hello everyone. I'm currently in a difficult situation and I'm unsure if I'm making the right decisions. By the way, this is my first post here, so please forgive me if I miss any details. Feel free to ask for more information. Let me share my current situation. I'm a 25-year-old male and I've been in a relationship with my wife, who is 27 years old, for 8.5 years. Last August, during our trip to the USA, I proposed to her. We legally got married 10 weeks ago, had a church ceremony 5 weeks ago, and went on our honeymoon 2 weeks after that. During our honeymoon, I noticed something unusual for the first time. She was constantly texting on her phone and tried to hide it or turn off the display whenever I glanced at it to see who she was talking to. When I asked, she claimed she was texting her friends or her sister. This made me suspicious, and in the beginning of the second week, I decided to check her phone while she was asleep. It was the first time I had ever felt the need to do this because I had always trusted her. To my shock, I discovered that the woman I believed loved me, the one I had married just a month prior, was cheating on me with someone else, a 39-year-old man. He works as a cook where she is employed, so they see each other daily during the week. We still had to stay together for the rest of the week and our flight home during our honeymoon, so I didn't confront her about it at that time because I didn't want to have a fight while on our honeymoon. I have no idea how I managed to hold it in. After further investigation when we returned home, I found out that their relationship had begun at the end of November last year, which was after our engagement but well before our wedding. I don't understand why she didn't mention this to me earlier when we had plenty of time to cancel our wedding. Somehow, I didn't catch on until it was too late. I haven't talked to my wife about this yet, so she doesn't know that I'm aware of her affair. However, I think she might suspect that I'm suspicious of something. We still have tasks left, like selecting our wedding photos for the album and writing thank you letters for the gifts we received, which is why I haven't brought up this issue until now. But I'm feeling really tormented inside and I need to address this situation. I'm currently looking into whether I can legally remove her from our house. We rented it together and both our names are on the contract, and whether our wedding can be annulled or if I need to go through a divorce process. Here's an important detail. The other guy is separated from his wife and has 2 teenage children. He's not getting a divorce right now because they have some outstanding loans to repay. Additionally, they frequently express their love for each other and a desire to be together fully, but they can't do so at the moment. From what I know, their plan involves my wife having children with me, since the other guy already has some, and then, when he's ready, either divorced or otherwise, they will pursue a relationship together. My dilemma is that I feel guilty for contemplating divorce less than 2 months after our wedding, especially after the big celebration and all the gifts we received. However, I can't continue living like this. I'm not sure what I'm expecting from you all. Maybe just confirmation that I'm making the right choice by leaving her and seeking a divorce. Thank you for any advice or insights you can provide. Best regards. Update. I'm planning to speak with our office lawyer today to see if they have any information on this matter. If they don't, I'll contact a specific lawyer to get some advice on how to proceed. Regarding our financial situation, neither of us is wealthy. We're both doing okay. If she worked full-time like I do, she currently works 75% due to her employer's restrictions, she would actually earn more than me. My parents, on the other hand, are reasonably well off, but not excessively so. I guess you could say they're upper middle class. However, everything I owned before our marriage remains mine, and everything she owned before our marriage remains hers. Anything acquired or purchased after our marriage will be divided. She also won't inherit anything from my parents because it's my right to receive it, and this was the case before we got married. Update 1. I've discussed the matter with the lawyer in our office who doesn't have much knowledge about it. They provided me with contact information for someone who should be able to assist me. I'm planning to call them today or tomorrow and arrange a meeting as soon as possible. I'll keep you all updated on how things progress. Thanks to everyone for your support in the meantime. Update 2. I've spoken with the lawyer and she needs to research whether having another relationship is sufficient grounds for annulling the marriage. In all her years of handling divorces, it's the first time someone has contacted her so soon after getting married, and she expressed her sympathy for my situation. However, she's looking into it and will inform me of the available options in a few days. I'll keep you posted once she gets back to me. Update 3. I have up to 6 months from the marriage to initiate an annulment, so I have some time to talk to the priest and explore the possibility of annulling the wedding in the church. I plan to focus on my upcoming school exams over the next 2 weeks, and then discuss this matter with my wife calmly. The challenge is figuring out how to start this conversation with her without making it sound harsh like, "Hey, I know you're cheating on me." Update 4. I've had a discussion with our priest, and it turns out he can also initiate an annulment process. However, he suggested that I first talk to my wife about it, without immediately jumping to divorce. He wants her to decide whether she wants to stay with me or not. I'm unsure about giving her that choice because I'm not sure I can ever trust her again. The tricky part is figuring out how to begin this conversation with her. I know there's no perfect moment, but perhaps you can provide some advice. What should I say? What should I avoid saying? The priest advised me not to focus on her faults, but instead express how my feelings are hurt and how our marriage feels strained. I shouldn't bring up forgiveness, but should offer my help. I should provide enough information so she understands that I'm aware of her cheating, but I shouldn't reveal too much. It's probably better to consult my lawyer first to understand the next steps and discuss the house we're renting together. The contract has both our names, and only then have the conversation with my wife. Hello everyone, a lot has transpired since my last post. Previously, I inquired about whether I should address the issue or proceed with divorce or annulment. I provided updates regarding my conversations with a lawyer, who informed me that I could request an annulment within 6 months of marriage. However, since cheating isn't explicitly mentioned in the law as grounds for annulment, she couldn't guarantee a 100% success rate for annulment. So, in the worst-case scenario, I'll proceed with a divorce. I also consulted our priest, and from the church's perspective, I can request an annulment at any time, provided I can prove that the cheating occurred before, during, and after the marriage. Fortunately, I have all the necessary evidence to establish this. When I confided in my friends, they unanimously recommended that I ask her to leave my home immediately. Consequently, after gathering all the requisite information, I confronted my wife about this matter 3 weeks ago. Our conversation was filled with tears, some raised voices, although I managed to remain composed, and we discussed a multitude of issues in the subsequent days. We even spent a weekend away together to address everything privately. In summary, she doesn't have a clear reason for why she cheated on me. It just happened. She didn't bring it up earlier because she feared my reaction, thinking I might get angry, leave her alone, and go away. Which raises the question of what she expected to happen when I found out after we got married. She assured me that she still loves me. So I asked her to figure out what she truly wants, and what she's willing to do to salvage our marriage. Depending on her decision, I would then determine whether I wanted to give it another shot with her or not, although I was already about 90% inclined to leave her. After a week, I still hadn't received a clear answer from her about whether she wanted me or the other guy, so I made the decision for both of us. If she couldn't decide between her husband and her lover within less than 3 months of marriage, then I could certainly decide whether I wanted to spend my life with her or not. 2 weeks ago, we mutually agreed to end our relationship. The unfortunate part is that during this whole time, she didn't ask me once to stay. She was sad about me leaving, but I think she was also happy about the prospect of pursuing a relationship with the other guy. Last week, I disclosed the entire situation to my parents and brothers. They were all saddened by the news but understood the situation and agreed that it's the best decision for me. On the same day, my wife also informed her parents and they asked her to leave their home. She had to stay with some friends temporarily, but has since rented an apartment and is in the process of moving her belongings out of my house. In 10 days, I'll be meeting with the lawyer to initiate the process for an annulment of our marriage. I also need to give the priest an update that my wife has moved out of my house and then request the annulment through the church. At this point, I'm at a loss for words. My marriage didn't even last 3 months, and it seems my wife was almost relieved to part ways. So I feel there's nothing more to be said. I realize that I still need some time to heal from all of this, but things are slowly improving. I'm getting accustomed to being on my own and handling all the household responsibilities. I appreciate your support. Now I have to start over with my life, and I hope to find someone who truly loves me one day. Story 2. I'm a 22-year-old guy, and I have suspicions about something going on between my girlfriend, Alexis, 22, female, and my friend, Derek, 21, male. We all live together, and sometimes I wonder if I'm just imagining things. The 4 of us attended the same university, and our apartment, which Alexis and our mutual friend Brooke, 22, female, originally leased, is large and expensive. Initially, there were supposed to be 3 girls living here, but the 3rd person backed out suddenly. Although they planned to move to a cheaper place, they had invested a lot in this apartment and didn't want to leave. When my lease ended 6 months ago, I suggested moving in to split the rent and utilities 3 ways, as I was already staying over frequently. Both girls were thrilled with the idea. Shortly before I moved in, Brooke started dating my best friend Derek, which seemed great because it meant both couples could hang out with their significant others and best friends all together. Derek began staying over more often, and when his parents recently sold their house and left town, he temporarily moved in with us. We haven't pressured him to find a new place because sharing expenses among 4 people is financially beneficial for all of us. However, it's important to note that only Alexis and Brooke are on the lease. Surprisingly, the apartment owner doesn't mind our living situation as long as the rent is paid because we're quiet. However, there have been 3 incidents that have raised suspicions for me. I want to clarify that I wouldn't make an accusation like this if it weren't for these incidents. Alexis is a sweet and shy girl, and Derek has been like a brother to me. They don't appear flirtatious, but as I mentioned earlier, all 4 of us are very close friends and spend a lot of time together. Brooke and I have early classes, so we leave by 8 a.m. Derek and Alexis have afternoon classes, so it's not unusual for them to leave together, although they usually take separate cars. One day, I decided to wait for Alexis outside her class to surprise her with lunch. I watched everyone coming out of the class, but Alexis wasn't among them. I texted her to ask where she was, and she replied, "Just go to the class. Going home to study." I called her, but there was no response, which struck me as odd because she had just texted me a moment ago. She didn't answer until much later, which is unusual for her as she's often on her phone. Later that day, I bumped into Brooke, and she casually mentioned that Derek had stayed home sick, and she was planning to bring him some soup. At the time, I didn't think much of it. However, when I got home later that night, I noticed that Alexis's car was in the exact same spot it had been all day. She typically parks in guest parking since our unit only has 3 spaces, so her car usually moves around. I asked her if she had gone to class and she hesitated before admitting that she skipped because she found the professor's explanations frustrating. She knows I dislike it when she skips classes because it has affected her grades before. However, she had been doing better recently. While I was doing the dishes, I kissed her and told her I trusted her judgment. She explained that she probably wouldn't skip again because being alone in the house when bored was unpleasant. We laughed, and the night went on as usual. We went to bed, and as I lay there, almost drifting off, something struck me. She shouldn't have been alone because Derek was supposedly homesick, right? She was still awake on her phone. I suddenly woke up and asked her where Derek was today, considering Brooke had mentioned he was homesick. She seemed surprised by the question, possibly because I went from half asleep to wide awake with a random inquiry. She said he had been here a bit in the morning, but went out to run errands or something. She wasn't sure. After the other incidents, I couldn't help but feel that her scattered response to this question seemed off, although it might just be my imagination. The second incident occurred when I went to throw some things in the kitchen garbage and noticed a rubber wrapper of the exact same brand that Alexis and I use. It wasn't very visible, tucked behind a cereal box, but its distinctive color caught my eye. It was torn. Derek always uses a different brand. It was unusual because we typically keep the wrappers in our own room's garbage cans, so they don't end up in the kitchen. Additionally, due to exams and stress, Alexis and I hadn't been intimate in a few days. I didn't go searching for a used protection or anything. I just returned to the room to check if some of our supplies were missing. It was hard to tell because we buy in bulk. My initial thought was that Brooke and Derek might have run out and taken from our stock without asking, which upset me. Later that night, I brought up the rubber wrapper to Alexis, and she seemed surprised. When I mentioned my theory, she became unusually agitated. She's usually very calm but went on a rant about their invasion of our privacy. I suggested talking to them about it, but she immediately shot down the idea and made me promise not to bring it up unless they did it again. It struck me as strange because we're generally open about sexual topics, but living together might have made Alexis uncomfortable discussing it. She comes from a conservative small town and isn't as open about these things as we are. Derek and I get along with the guys in the neighboring apartment who are also graduates of our university. We don't hang out, but we have a friendly relationship where we exchange small talk about sports or chat in the hallway. It's comfortable enough that we can ask each other to keep it down without it being awkward. This brings us to the third incident that occurred last Monday. I was alone at the apartment when I bumped into one of the guys from next door. We chatted about football, and then he mentioned that one of the couples in our apartment complex was really into morning intimacy and the walls were too thin for their liking. I chuckled because Alexis and I occasionally had morning activities on weekends when we had the place to ourselves. Brooke and Derek typically spent weekends at her parents' house, which was about an hour and a half away. But as the day went on, I realized we hadn't engaged in morning activities for about a month. On weekends, it had shifted more towards the evening or not at all. Did he mean on weekdays? It made me uneasy. I considered asking for more details, but the conversation ended and I felt like I missed my chance. Plus, it's an awkward question, and I might just be overly suspicious. So here's my dilemma. Am I overthinking things? Am I seeing signs that aren't there? Or is something actually going on? And if something is amiss, how should I proceed? I'm hesitant to ask her directly at this point because, for one, I don't want to seem jealous or paranoid if nothing happened. And two, if there is something going on, I don't want them to become more discreet about it. One idea I had was dropping by one of these mornings when they're alone together, but I'm unsure of the right timing. If I show up too early or too late, they might become more cautious. Update. Most of you recommended that I talk to Brooke and consider walking in on the situation. I decided to do both. Sunday night, everyone was back in the apartment. I had planned to talk to Brooke privately about our neighbor's comment, but before I could, she said something that completely contradicted my theory. She told Derek to go to bed early for work the next morning. What? I knew Derek had a job on campus, but he had always worked night shifts casually. I asked when he started working mornings, and he said he picked up the extra shifts a month ago. Starting at 9 a.m., I leave for my day at 7:45 a.m., so it's possible I hadn't noticed. I spent the night trying to figure out if he was lying, if there were still mornings he was at home, or if Alexis might be seeing someone else in the mornings, as some of you suggested. Or maybe I was just being paranoid. I went to bed feeling drained and confused. The next morning, I left for my classes as usual, alternating between wanting to rush home to check on Alexis and thinking I had too much work to chase a theory I wasn't sure about anymore. Eventually, I headed home after my first class. In a strange way, I almost wish I hadn't. When I arrived at the apartment, Derek's car was absent. Only Alexis's car was there. My heart raced as I walked to the apartment. I didn't know what to expect outside the apartment door. Immediately, I heard a guy's voice from inside, chatting, laughing, and a soft feminine voice responding with giggles. I've seen various reactions to this situation on this subreddit, but I had never thought about what I'd do in such a situation. I pressed my ear to the door, trying to catch their conversation, but I could only make out a word here and there amidst the giggles. Then I heard Alexis being tickled and shrieking. Maybe I should have waited longer. Looking back, I wish I had. However, as soon as I started fiddling with my keys, it went eerily silent inside. She was with Mark. I hadn't mentioned Mark in my previous post, but he's one of the guys in the apartment next to ours, not the one who initially tipped me off. I never liked Mark, his know-it-all attitude and his inappropriate comments towards both girls. But I had never suspected this. As soon as I opened the door, both of them looked at me with guilty expressions, dispelling any naive doubts I might have had about the situation being innocent. I had intended to confront them or demand answers, but my eyes welled up with tears, and I didn't want them to see me like that. So I simply said, "Nice, real nice," and hurried back to my car. I could hear Alexis yelling my name in the hallway, but I didn't stop. I half expected her to chase after me, but when I reached my car, no one was following. I drove to a nearby park and sat there in disbelief. Strangely, my first thought was, how is my family going to react to this? What on earth am I going to tell them? My family absolutely adores Alexis. They often joked about our wedding and considered her a part of the family. Then I started thinking about our living arrangements, our final exams, and the fact that in about 2 weeks I can't handle moving right now. I'm in the midst of applying to an extremely competitive graduate program, and I can't allow anything to jeopardize that, especially not this. Fortunately, a friend has offered me a place to stay. I'll have to return home at some point to get my clothes, and I'm planning to do that during a lab period. Alexis took about an hour before she started blowing up my phone, but once she did, the messages didn't stop. She initially asked me to come home so she could explain, even before I had a chance to respond. Then she sent another message begging me to return because she was having an anxiety attack, something I'd always helped her through. Maybe I'm heartless, but all I could think was, good, you earned it. There was a pause, and then she said, I don't understand why you're so jealous. We were just hanging out. I waited and she continued, I know it may look sketchy, but trust me, if I were in your shoes, I'd think the same thing. But we weren't doing anything. He needed advice on girl problems. You have to believe me. Honestly, I don't believe her. Normally, I'd feel a strange sense of satisfaction watching a cheater struggle to cover their tracks. But my mind kept replaying all the wonderful times we had together and wondering if she was cheating back then too. I'm torn between wanting to know when this started and being worried about it. This has been going on for more than just a month, and I have my suspicions. Later that night, I received a text from an unknown number. It turned out to be the friendly guy from next door. He mentioned that he got my number from Derek and expressed his profound apologies for what I'm going through. He admitted he should have told me sooner but wasn't entirely certain. He knew his friend was involved with a girl who had a boyfriend but didn't connect the dots until he learned her name. As many of you suspected, his earlier comment was an attempt to clue me in. So, I guess he's the bro of the year. I don't think Derek and Brooke are aware of this yet. I haven't messaged them. I haven't found the right words. I know this is going to turn our living situation and friendships upside down. I suppose I should message them before Alexis spins a different narrative. So, it turns out it wasn't Derek. It was one of our neighbors, a fact we didn't know until now. Given this mess, the only silver lining is that it seems like Obi-Wan has nothing to do with Alexis, and their relationship is over as it should be. But we can't be completely sure of that yet. Let's move on to the next update to see what unfolds. A quick clarification on the last update. When I walked in, they weren't literally in the act. They were just sitting on the couch with a deer-in-the-headlights look that was highly incriminating. They both fell silent, and it was clear this wasn't a, hey, guess who dropped by kind of situation. Anyways, on to the latest update. I've been incredibly busy with the semester wrapping up, and I heeded the advice to bury myself in my work. I've spent a lot of time at the library because Alexis doesn't go there. While posting the last update, I realized how foolish it was that I hadn't reached out to Derek and Brooke to share my side of the story. I took a screenshot of the text from the friendly neighbor, Will. Just a side note, all names have been changed except Mark's because within a minute Derek bombarded my phone with calls and texts, making it clear he had no idea what was going on. Meanwhile, Alexis was sending texts, practically begging me to meet up with her. I felt awful and replied to Derek with a single text, saying I wasn't in the mood for talking. Then, I put my phone away for the night. The next morning, I received a text from Derek inviting me to my favorite restaurant for dinner and drinks, assuring me that no one else would be there, not even Brooke. I haven't had much of an appetite since all of this happened, but the offer meant a lot, and I genuinely wanted to see him. So I decided to go after my classes. I arrived at the restaurant first, my heart in my throat, worrying that Alexis might somehow be there. Thankfully, she wasn't. When Derek showed up, he gave me a big hug and immediately asked, "Dude, what the heck?" Now, things get a bit crazy and dramatic. Many of you suggested that Brooke might side with Alexis or had been covering for her the entire time. I wasn't so sure because even though she's closer to Alexis, she and I have been friends for a bit longer. According to Derek, as soon as he told Brooke, she was absolutely furious. In his words, "I sort of wanted to give Alexis a piece of my mind, but Brooke handled that and then some." You might remember I mentioned that Alexis came from a conservative small town. Her parents had no clue we were living together, and she always stressed that they shouldn't find out, as they might cut off her financial support. Her parents liked me enough to be polite, but they were constantly concerned that our relationship might distract her from school or lead to an unplanned pregnancy. Derek explained that Brooke demanded Alexis pack her things and find a new place, or else she'd spill the beans to her parents. Derek mentioned that later that night, he heard Alexis crying in the living room while hanging a sweater I had left behind. She was wailing about her life being over when Brooke emerged from her bedroom and said, "Well, maybe you shouldn't have left Mark then." It's kind of funny to imagine that moment. Brooke has always been a no-nonsense girl with a hot temper. But I certainly didn't expect her to react this way. It was incredibly touching that she took cheating so seriously during that dinner. All my worries about losing my friends were completely washed away, and I managed to eat a few pieces of sushi. When we left dinner, Derek offered to let me know when Alexis was gone so I could move back in. I declined his offer for a few reasons. Firstly, even if she does move out, everything in that apartment reminds me of her, from Derek and Brooke to Alexis and Mark, and I don't really want to sleep in it. Secondly, in my current emotional state, I don't want to feel like a third wheel with a happy couple, even though I'm sure they'd be understanding. He understood my points but told me to inform him if I changed my mind. It seems like Brooke and Alexis's friendship is pretty much over. This week has been quite uneventful, but I've had to avoid Alexis. Fortunately, I'm in an undergraduate program with only 60 students. I asked 2 friends to keep an eye out for her after sharing the story and started showing up to class at the last minute. To my knowledge, she only waited outside one of my classes. I received a text saying she had been spotted in front of that classroom, and it mentioned, "Waterworks are in progress. Proceed with caution." I ended up skipping that class because I wasn't sure if she would leave, and I really didn't want to risk an uncomfortable encounter. Later that night, she sent me a lengthy Facebook message explaining everything from the beginning, and it made me feel sick reading it. I thought about not reading it, but once I opened it, I couldn't stop. She mentioned that he had been flirty with her in the halls and she tried to be friendly in return, but it might have seemed like flirting because he kissed her mid-sentence. At one point, she expressed guilt for inadvertently leading him on, which made it difficult for her to reject his advances. She mentioned that it had happened only 3 times, and she hated it. She stated she was going to end it. During the conversation I walked in on, she expressed understanding if I needed time and space, and she said she would do anything to make it right. She offered to treat me like a king, assuring me I'd never have to cook, clean, or do my laundry again. She wanted full access to her phone and passwords, even suggesting we install Life 360, an app to track her location through her phone. She wanted me to cut off all contact with Mark and her male friends, just to be safe, I suppose. She offered makeup sex whenever I wanted. Does that sound like a healthy relationship to you? I didn't respond. Part of me wanted to keep her on Facebook and watch the drama unfold. She was posting dramatic statuses and song lyrics about mistakes, forgiveness, and some related to our song. But I know myself too well. I don't want to compulsively check her page and sift through old photos, so I blocked her. A few hours later, Derek texted me, saying she was crying and screaming because I blocked her. In happier news, the family I'm staying with is fantastic. I felt a bit guilty about taking up their space and using their electricity, so I offered to pay rent and contribute to some bills. Even though I'm unemployed, my family provides me with a decent allowance for rent and food. However, they declined the offer and said the first month is free. If I need more time here, we'll discuss it, they said with a wink. A friend told me they've hosted his and his sister's troubled friends before, so it's not a big deal to them. I'm incredibly grateful. Regarding the helpful neighbor, I called him to express my gratitude. He mentioned that Mark has been unusually quiet these past few days and informed another guy that he had been dumped. Whatever. I don't want to think about it. I sent Brooke a message thanking her for kicking Alexis out, and she said she'd do it regardless of whether or not I move back in. She's going to give me a heads up on when Alexis is gone so I can get the rest of my things. In the meantime, I'm spending a lot of time studying, applying to grad school, and hanging out with the guy I'm living with. I'm going to wait until after finals to tell my parents about the situation, because my mom asks a million questions about everything, and I'm not in the mood to answer them. Once finals were over, everything hit me like a ton of bricks. I went through my social media and removed all the pictures with her, threw out items that reminded me of her, and even removed our songs from my playlist. We'd been inseparable since we met, so this was over 2 years of memories. To put it shortly, it was really tough, but I had this urge to get it all done quickly. Then, a particular Redditor messaged me, expressing concern that Alexis might be struggling with dangerous thoughts now that she's lost everything: her closest friends, her boyfriend, and her apartment. I know it might sound dramatic, but that message stuck in my mind. What Alexis did was absolutely terrible, but I thought a final conversation might give me better closure and maybe help her understand that it's truly over and encourage her to move on. So I messaged Alexis, saying that if she wanted to talk, we could meet up somewhere, but there was no way we could be together after what happened, so please don't ask. Surprisingly, she responded almost immediately, asking when and where. We agreed to meet at an off-campus coffee place. When I got there, she was already at the table and tried to hug me, but I waved her away. I felt terrible, but I wanted to get this conversation over with. She asked how I'd been and how finals went, but I interrupted and asked her if she had been unhappy in our relationship. Her eyes widened, and she repeatedly said, "No," before falling silent. So I asked her why she did what she did if she wasn't unhappy. She started by retelling the story about having trouble saying no and how he was very pushy. I interrupted her and asked her to stop with the excuses and take responsibility, at least for what happened after he kissed her mid-sentence. But having sex 3 times? No way. She looked down, shrugged, and admitted, "You're right, I know." She began tearing up, apologizing and saying how sorry she was. Then she asked if there was any chance we could get back together, which I somewhat expected, even though I told her not to. I just shook my head. I suggested she could continue living with Derek and Brooke if she wanted to, but she declined and said she already had plans to move in with another girlfriend. From there, the conversation became circular, with them trying to explain her actions as difficulties in turning down guys due to her fear of being seen as unfriendly, and me trying to get her to admit that excuse was nonsense. I don't know why, but I really needed her to stop using that crutch and admit that she had ruined a perfectly good relationship all on her own. But she just wouldn't. She was always stubborn. Eventually, I let it go, and we parted ways somewhat amicably. As I was leaving, she grabbed my hand as if to say something, but ended up shaking her head and letting go. Initially, the conversation made me feel worse than before, but ultimately, it made me realize that she was never the kind of person I wanted to be with, even without the cheating. She never took responsibility for anything, failing classes, not finding a job or internship, and more. It was always someone else's fault. I just hadn't thought about it too deeply. After the coffee meeting, I met up with Derek, and we went to the apartment. Brooke was there, but she mostly stayed in her room. We had some beers, played video games, and talked about everything that had happened. Derek admitted they hadn't been able to find a third roommate. Aside from complete strangers, they didn't want to move in, and they asked me again to stay with them. I could tell that Derek really wanted me to, and I felt guilty about them being stuck with the lease, so I accepted. I told them I'd wait until Alexis took all her furniture and belongings from before I even moved in, as I still didn't want to sleep in that bed. Life isn't perfect now, but I'm doing better. Alexis moved her things out. I bought a secondhand bed and dresser from another student. I had my first round of classes last week, and although I might sound like a total nerd, they're really cool and hands-on, and the professors are incredibly nice. Derek and Brooke have been really supportive and don't make me feel like a third wheel at all. I saw Mark in the hallway once, and he completely ignored me, and I ignored him. But the urge to punch him in the face was very real. I guess that's something that will go